Hey guys, Scott here, and today I'm going to be taking a comprehensive look at the player versus player interactions of the entire Souls series and go over the obvious question of why is it so neglected compared to the masterful player versus environment elements. Now when I say the Souls series, I refer to every game From Software has made since Demon Souls, with the exception of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, as that game sort of strayed away from the standard Souls formula. Now this includes Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and finally Elden Ring. Now, the PvP in the Souls series to this day is pretty much unmatched by any game ever made. The extremely unique formula of invading other people's single-player games using the character you yourself are playing the game with is a very addicting and difficult to replicate style of player interaction, and it's what has kept fans of that style of play coming back over and over. However, as even the most die-hard of Souls PvP fanatics will tell you, the actual technical component to the PvP interactions is just terrible. The sad part is, it's been terrible for 13 years since Demon Souls. It is only by virtue of how incredibly unique this system is do we push through that mediocrity and continue to PvP. Anyone that has ever PvP'd in these games before can easily see the immediate problems with online combat, namely things like, getting hit from further away than an animation would dictate, connections just dropping entirely, sliding on the ground without any animations called the Miyazaki Shuffle, complete lack of ping-based matchmaking, peer-to-peer fights with multiple players, each having their own peer-to-peer connection with each other, which can cause numerous issues, desynced world enemies, and an entire mountain of balancing issues. Still, like I said, because the system is so unique and no other developer has truly successfully replicated it in a AAA game, people just accept it as their only option for this style of gameplay. Now, for a while, I thought it was fair, because no developer had ever done anything like this. You would expect it to have its fair share of issues, having no other examples to really learn from. Yet, with Elden Ring, we aren't on From Software's first Souls game. We aren't on their second, or third, or fourth, or fifth. If we include Bloodborne, which I do for purposes of this argument due to the similarities in how the PvP functions, Elden Ring is From Software's sixth Souls game in a row with core, fundamental issues regarding online connectivity as a whole, much less just the PvP component itself. Now, current defenders of Elden Ring's PvP will commonly cite, we'll just give it more time like each Souls game has had, but this usually refers to getting the game in a more balanced state, not the fundamental aspects that make up the multiplayer. There is no more just giving it time. They've had 13 years to refine not getting hit from 5 miles away from another player. It's just not acceptable like it was 13 years ago, and again, speaking as a diehard Souls fan, it's agitating to see people still defending this stuff after so long. Still, as I mentioned, it's not all about the technical aspects. The balance of Souls PvP has never, ever been good in any game. The closest we ever came to a balanced Souls PvP experience was Dark Souls 2, which is widely regarded to have the best PvP in the series. In fact, Dark Souls 2 received far more PvP-centric patches than any other Souls game, and had by far the most variety of successful yet balanced builds in the series. Now, interestingly, this is the only game Hidetaka Miyazaki, the director of the Souls series, did not direct himself. Now, whether or not Miyazaki is a variable in the amount of care given to PvP is certainly worth considering, but it's kind of ultimately, irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Another interesting point of contention about Dark Souls 2 is that while it is widely regarded as the most complete PvP experience, it's also seen as the ugly duckling of the series for the PvE experience. Does this mean the team dedicated more resources to PvP and thus the single player suffered? Now, if that's the case, then the question of should the PvE be sacrificed for the PvP's sake presents itself. Now, most would answer no to that question for the same reason of, single player of the Souls games are just masterpieces, while the PvP is terrible, so the focus should be on the PvE. Yet we have sort of a chicken or the egg scenario as in which came first, in which, this is the common opinion because PvP is so badly handled. Either way, with how successful From Software has been, there's not really an excuse to not have a masterful PvE team as they already do, and a masterful PvP team, as I'm sure they can afford to have at this point. So, because I fully believe they have the resources to make the PvP that matches the technology of this century, I have to ask the question, why do they not do that? Let's be clear, the Souls games are not PvP games. They are single-player games with the occasional co-op and occasional PvP elements. I'm not delusional, I get that PvP has never been the main focus of these games. Still, it is abundantly clear how much content arises from the PvP scene in all of the Souls games. An absolutely massive proportion of all of the highest viewed Souls-related videos on YouTube have been and are related to the ridiculous encounters that happen in PvP. Pretty much the only other ones are speedruns and Vadi's lore videos. like hundreds of millions of views on these PvP videos in turns more eyes onto the game and thus result in more sales on the game. And again, I realize that most people are not buying Souls games just for the PvP, but to pretend that they're an insignificant speck compared to the mountain of PvE is just simply incorrect based on how much attention popular PvP videos actually get. Other than speedruns or challenge runs or, lore videos, PvP is essentially the only thing that retains players in the large 4 to 5 year gap between FromSoft games. Still, let's look at it from a business perspective. It is obviously true that PvP is what keeps people playing these games past a certain point, as eventually there's just nothing else to do in the single player. But should From Software care? They are a rare company that typically just sells a complete game, which is just very rare nowadays. There are no microtransactions, subscriptions, or any further revenue gained by continuing to play the game in any way. So in a black and white money is all that matters state of mind, there's actually no incentive for FromSoft to actually care about the PvP. But if we stretch that logic out, why add PvP in the game at all? What's the point? If all that matters is the initial sale of the game, why care about retention whatsoever? It would make no financial sense to devote resources to something that will have no monetary returns for the company. And yet, they keep adding PvP every single game. So it's almost like they know it's something that people are interested in, so they just sort of duct tape it together and just throw it in there, but they don't care enough to actually make it a modern, functional PvP experience. It's in that awkward in-between that makes it so there's so much heartbreak for fans of the PvP and the Souls series. The retention of players in the PvP scene is also at an all-time low. Just go look at any casual playthrough on any streams of Elden Ring and watch them be forced to interact with an invader for the first time. It's frankly an embarrassing experience every single time for how poorly the game handles it. Simple, absolutely basic things like hearing the hit sound when you hit an opponent who is in iframes on their screen is not something players should have to research to understand why that's happening. They shouldn't have to research that after 13 years you can still have status effects applied to you even if the opponent's attack missed, because they still have not made sure to add a single check to make sure if the attack actually hits you before applying the status effect. It is 2022, there is just no excuse anymore for netcode this terrible. Now, while seasoned veterans have learned to deal with this, and some have even learned to manipulate the netcode to their advantage, it doesn't change the fact that the series does not welcome new players to PvP in any regard, and the only assumption I can make about it is because From Software just doesn't care enough to rectify it. The sad thing is that every once in a while, you do get that truly perfect PvP experience. In Dark Souls 3, I made this video with someone on a LAN connection, and it was beautiful. It was zero ping. The game actually functioned as it was a 3-dimensional fighting game, but this experience is literally like 1 in a million. If people could experience that more often, I have no doubt they would be sucked into what we've all come to love over the years. And I haven't even begun to start expanding on that whole balancing aspects of the game, because I want to focus on something that even the most die-hard defenders in From Software cannot defend. With the hundreds and hundreds of weapons and spells in this game, it's far more understandable that the balancing would take a much longer time to nail. But even then, extremely simple 1-second patches in which the player-to-player damage is reduced by something like 30% or something would take zero effort to add, zero time to add, and they already have the code for it because certain talismans in the game, and just like certain rings in Dark Souls 3, have reduced effectiveness on players already. I've seen the actual, the code and how the engine works, and there's a separate modifier to attacks and things like that for the damage that it does to players. So this would band-aid the extremely high damage problem Elden Ring has had since its release, but they just choose to not do it and embrace players one-shotting each other every other fight, which just leads to frustration and people again reinforcing that the From Software PvP is just terrible. It's just so sad because Elden Ring is a masterpiece. It might be my favorite game ever made. I'm 32 years old, and to say that is a monumental achievement. Given the choice, would I trade PvP quality for a more lackluster single-player experience? No, of course not for anything. The problem is, the point I'm trying to make is, why should that be a choice anymore? FromSoft is a massive company with some of the most successful games in gaming history. There is just no excuse anymore to not dedicate a modicum of care to the PvP component of their game. Now, they have shown they're capable of masterpieces time and time again, so what reasoning is there for the terrible PvP systems in their game? If they want to focus on their single-player experience, then do that. Stop tacking on PvP in an extremely half-assed way, so we all quickly become disappointed and just rip the band-aid off by just not having PvP at all. If they do want to make good PvP, then just do it. You have the resources to. You can hire an entire damn company just for the PvP component for your games. There's just no excuse anymore. I know a lot of defenders will say, well, if you don't like the PvP anymore, then just stop playing it. To which I respond, you're right. I have stopped playing it. Elden Ring was dropped shorter than any other Souls game in history for me, because it just seems like they're going backwards. And because the PvP systems are so incredibly and unique, I'll never get to play anything like it. And so, it just makes me sad. I wish it wasn't like this. I wish they cared more about their PvP systems. But from a monetary standpoint, it would make sense that they wouldn't. Either way, that is it. I just wanted to rant about that for a bit. Thanks for watching. See you next time.